Hey, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Wildlands. Following on from the implementation of our brand new entrance plaza last time, this time we're going to be taking a look at bringing one of our brand new animals into a brand new themed area that we're going to be visiting over the next couple of videos. Now, our first area that we're going to build in the new zoo format, as we're going to call it, is heavily inspired by Western Asia, as well as architectural styles from places like Vietnam and Cambodia. Why, you might ask? Well, because I wanted to, and it looked really good, so I thought I'd do it. Now, before we jump on in and get all of that started, today we don't have an engagement emoji because today's animal is the striped hyena, and I could not find anything suitable. So instead, what I would like you to do is tell me your most funniest dad jokes, so jokes that are generally not funny, down in the comments below, all for the sake of engagement. And on top of that, anybody who tells me one that actually makes me laugh will get a little mention at the start of next time's video. The gauntlet is laid. Go show just exactly how funny you are. So I wanted to do something special to jump off with our new look Wildlands, and you would think that would mean doing the big main centerpiece habitat, and actually no, I kind of wanted to use this habitat as a way of checking that my idea for the rest of the zone makes sense and looks good. So if this turns out looking awful, next week we'll do, I don't know, Africa. But if it turns out well, and spoiler, it does turn out well, we will likely be back doing more Cambodian stylings in the next video. So today we're going to build a habitat for the striped hyena, which I actually was not planning on doing until I read that they actually live in forests as well. And I thought it's a nice little addition. It's one of those weird sort of, until you go to a zoo and see this, you'd probably never know. Now we're starting off with a little bit of landscaping. We're just going to build it up at the back and have it slope down towards the building where their internal habitat will lay. And then once we've got that roughly sketched out, we're going to jump over and make the first big scenery piece for this area, which is going to be our Cambodian inspired walls and ruins. And we're going to do that a few ways. We're going to use initially the faux bricks. I'm going to rotate them in different setups, so we've got different sizes. And then we're also going to bring in some of these Indonesian stones. Because these are flexicolor, we can mix them really easily. And what you'll find is once we actually get to the color stage is that all of them do tend to mix very, very well. And the Indonesian stone even has these little starbursts of different color variations, which adds a nice bit of detail. Once we've got our wall set up, we're going to pop a base on it. This will just make it easier to connect up in pieces later on. We want to keep this quite modular, as I can foresee us using this a few more times in future episodes. And then we're going to top it off with a nice headstone, just so we've got a nice flat surface to work with. On a separate piece, I'm going to start making little decorative pieces, and again, as this area evolves, we will get more and more and more. This is just based on a style I saw while doing some research. And then we're going to bring them over to the path and start putting them in to line up as our barrier. Now, a lot of this area is going to be focused around the idea of the scenery being intentionally and obviously fake. And what I mean by that is we're not going to carry these walls all the way around. We're not going to run them all the way down inside the habitat where they won't be seen. That would just be normal concrete. Where we are going to use them, however, in is areas that it matters. So for example, here where we're making our big glass viewing screen, I really liked, as I've mentioned before, the idea of these big openly curved sort of pieces of glass. So we're going to have a nice big open glass window here looking down across the river. We're going to decorate that up with a few extra additions from the Indonesian pack, and I really enjoy these stone. They're flexicolor, they work really well, and as you can see here, it just gives that wonderful theming without too much work. Now, to carry on the theme and to give ourselves a water source, we're going to make the front of a little shrine. We're going to do that again using mostly the Indonesian mossy stone parts, and we're just going to add them together. Really don't need to reinvent the wheel with this. These were made by the developers to go together, so let's use them together. I'm just going to cobble bits of them on top of each other until we get a nice flat fronted temple piece. We're not going to do the sides, we're not going to do the back. Again, this is a piece of scenery, not an accessible building. And I'm just going to put a trough on the very top, and that'll be where our water can then come cascading off. Once I've got it in position, I wanted to bring in some more shapes. So we've got the Flexicolor Indian dome here, and we're going to turn it all to the same color as the stone, and it actually works really well. I wasn't planning this kind of just happened, but I looked at it and thought, yeah, that's great. Now the back area of this habitat will eventually become our staff area for our riverbanks part. So since we're not going to get to that in this episode, we're not going to do too much back here, but we are going to block off the back of this with some wooden boarding and also put in a couple of supports. Again, I want this to feel like it is fake. This is a great way of doing that. It would essentially be how it would be set up in reality. Maybe not out of particle board and something a little bit more weatherproof, but the idea being is that you've got that wonderful sort of aesthetic on the front, and then round the back, it's all business. Now, how are we going to get our water up to our water feature, you ask? Well, we need some pipes. So we're going to pop them in, and then off camera, I've also gone back and added some water effects, which you will see later on. Down the other side of our riverbank here, we're going to have a drain, and this will eventually, when we get round to the other side of the path, drain into our other habitat. So for that, we're going to do, as I've done very early on in Wildlands, in fact, in one of our woodland episodes, we're going to make ourselves a drain. We're going to use the terracotta pot for that, change it into a concrete colour, add a couple of bars so nothing can climb into it. And then once we've got our bars and all that set in, we'll go in and just add some mesh at the back of those bars, just to make sure we don't get any debris or anything going in and clogging it up. I will point out here, this also demonstrates how painful it is to not work with the grid, which is absolutely something I need to stop doing and really focus on in the future. Now moving on to the riverbank itself, you've seen me do this before, but I'll give you a quick run through of how I do them. I start off with some tropical rock, which have got that wonderful dark soil colour to them, and then we're going to start adding in some of these giant faux trees as a bit of texture. We'll change that faux tree to a very similar colour, albeit a little bit darker, to the rock itself, and then once we've got all those placed, we're going to start adding in some of these roots just to break up the surface a bit. I will go back later on and add in some faux pebbles just to, again, add a little bit more variation, as well as a few plants. In areas where I want a nice defined edge to the edge of the riverbank, we're going to use the faux trees again and the roots just to merge together and make this wonderfully sharp and crisp edge. And then again, later on, we'll come back and add in some plant life just to disguise that transition from groundwork to the faux tree. Afterwards, I'll then go back round and put either mossy stones or the grass panels, depending on the habitat we're building, along the top, just so that you get a nicer merge of green to brown on the edge of the river. With all that finished, we're then just going to pop a couple of rocky outcroppings elsewhere in the habitat, and this is because as we get closer to where the guests are standing, we want this to be more open grassland, whereas at the back of the habitat needs to be more of a forest. And the idea is that the whole habitat rotates around the idea of this being the edge of a forest just on the outskirts, and the hyenas sort of coming out onto the grassland, but also having more forested shady areas to retreat to. We're also going to place a couple of fallen trees, and the Planet Zoo log is amazing for this. It's one of the best base game wooden items that they ever brought in, and I love it. So we're going to place a couple of these, one overhanging the river, just as though it's sort of fallen down and been left there, and a couple dotted around the habitat. The idea is we want to create some interesting sight lines, and you'll notice that I do keep going back to the glass window from where the guests are, just to have a look through, and we don't want to put too many trees up front. So these fallen logs just add a little bit of interest. Now as we move on to planting, we are once again hit with the challenge of plants needing to be of the same biome as the animal. And with that change very recently, that meant that the plants now affect the animal a lot more. It means we are a little bit more restricted. So instead of buffalo grass, we're going to be using dring grass. Use it sparingly, purely because it's quite a heavy, thick colour. And then we're also going to bring in the hosta and nettles to really bed some of those fallen trees into the ground, and just add nice little lush pop-ups of weeds everywhere. Once we've got our features set in, we're now going to start the proper planting, and I wanted to have a nice feature tree, so I'm going to put a willow overhanging the river, and I'm going to bed that in with some roots sticking out the base of it. Around the outside of the fences, we're going to put a lot more normal trees, temperate trees, as well as a lot more hedging, and the idea is to make a nice natural visual barrier so that the guests can't see through into the staff areas as much. For some finishing touches, we're going to throw down some broken branches into the river, so they've just been washed onto the land. We're going to decorate our little islands with some more weeds and also some of this pig face, which is a nice, short, darker colour and really draws the eye really well. I did crack a little bit here and bring in some buffalo grass. A little bit is fine, and I think on these islands, which are really meant to be where the guests would look, it's sort of that centrepiece of the view. I think having a little bit of buffalo grass with some nice thick and lush grass is kind of, it's okay. I think the hyenas will forgive me for this. We're also going to add in some faux rocks just as rubble at the bottom of our waterfall, as well as some rocks just to break up some of the riverbed further into the habitat. And then around the edges, we're going to pop down some of these tropical leaves, and these are going to be sort of where leaf matter has fell into the water and collected at the edges. They're very, very subtle, and to be fair, you'll see it, I'll see it, because we'll run the camera by it, but I don't think the guests would ever see it. But I like that they're there, and I think they just add a little bit of decoration to the edges of the water. Now with the outside habitat done, all that's left is to get the inside sorted. So we're going to start off by having a through path for staff to get from the front plaza through to what will eventually become the back area. And we're going to pop in some doors for that. Then we're going to start laying down a couple of floors, and this is just going to be concrete. We're going to keep this fairly modern. We've got these two giant windows for the guests to see the animals when it's too rainy and cold for them to be outside. You have seen me build internal fencing and internal backstage areas plenty of times before, so I'm not going to bore you with that. It's the same old metal beam, mesh and create. I'm going to pop down these temple bricks as a concrete footer, and this would just stop any liquids coming from inside of the animal area out to the outside. We're also going to use the same idea we've done in the past, where we have wonderful little rollers along the top of the gates for the gates to roll down. They use these LED caps to great success, and I really, really enjoy how these look, so I'm pretty much putting them absolutely everywhere. Now the idea is, certainly with this building and the other building that we'll come to next time for our other habitat, is that these are very modern buildings, very sparse. They're going to follow the same idea of being fairly new to the zoo. They'll have been designed with animal care and husbandry in mind, so they're not going to be overly thematic, and they're also not going to be overly interesting. I enjoy making them because I like the idea of having these backgrounds, but we're not going to go too busy on them. This is very much just a place for the animals to sleep. I'm going to finish up in here with a board for some cleaning products. I'm not gone too all out on this backstage, again also because when we do our staff area, it will likely bleed a bit through into this area, and frankly I was running out of time, so it's just a couple of shovels for today. And then outside, we're going to pop down a educational board, and we should be ready to have a jump into our cinematics. So let's go. Now I know I say this a lot, and I'm going to say it again, I love how this turned out. Really happy with it. The wall looks exactly how I wanted it to look. The hyenas look great inside the habitat. It's a little big, but I think, as I mentioned last time, I want to move away from going for the smallest habitat possible for the animal. I think if we've got the space to use, and we most definitely have, we should probably use it. This river is a great start for our riverbanks area. It will continue on through the next couple of habitats, which we will be jumping into next time. We will also look to get some more of the guest services sorted, but I am going to save doing the path and all of the bits around until the very last episode of this area, just because I have a really good idea that kind of requires all the other habitats to be built first, so we know where it can sit. More on that in a future episode. I also realised the hyena is a little bit out of field for this sort of theme, but when I read up and did the research and realised that they primarily live in woodlands and forests, it kind of made just so much sense to have these up here. They're not an animal that you would see very often in this element, and without really doing the research or potentially going to a zoo and seeing them like this, I don't think anyone would ever have guessed that you would see hyenas in a forest. So with that, it feels like the perfect placement to be at the forefront of our zoo. Nice little animal to see as you first come in, and really works with all the other animals that we'll be putting into this area. As always, let me know what you think down in the comments below. I have also tried a slightly different way of editing the video today, so it's much shorter and a lot less time has been spent on each area. Let me know what you think about that as well. If you like it, if you hate it, if you think it's great, let me know. down below. Those of you that are not subscribed, make sure you tippy tap that subscribe button to see more and see where we go with it. I've mentioned this in the past, but it really does help out the channel when you like the video. So if I have formed any form of entertainment for you today, please tippy tap that like button. Help me out, help us to grow. It's been brilliant so far and I know we can keep it going. With that all concluded, however, I will leave you with some wonderful cinematic and I will see you next time. Goodbye.